on the
All
live
right.
stream, just so you're aware. Let's see, I just need to keep my eye on the people arriving if there is anybody else tonight. If there will be some people in other countries. Good evening, everyone. We are in the process of getting organized, and it seems that we don't have our full panel tonight. It's probably because we have Olympics on the television. But anyway, we're hoping for some people to come and say hello to us. So we're going to go ahead with Chapter 8, General Remarks on the Therapeutic Approach to the Unconscious. And maybe we can whip right through this one with any luck. You want to go for it, Nick, with number 192, or I will? Hi, Justin. Nice to see you.
All right. Let's see here. We are greatly mistaken if we think that the unconscious is something harmless that could be made into an object of entertainment, a parlor game. Certainly, the unconscious is not always and in all circumstances dangerous, but as soon as a neurosis is present, it is a sign of a special heaping up of energy in the unconscious, like a charge that may explode. Here, caution is indicated. One never knows what one may be releasing when one begins to analyze dreams. Something deeply buried and invisible may thereby be set in motion, very probably something that would have come to light sooner or later anyway, but again, it might not. It is as if one were digging an artesian well and ran the risk of stumbling on a volcano. When neurotic symptoms are present, one must proceed very carefully. But the neurotic cases are not by a long way the most dangerous. There are cases of people apparently quite normal, showing no especial neurotic symptoms. They may themselves be doctors and educators, priding themselves on their morality, models of
normality,
priding themselves on their normality, models of good upbringing, with exceptionally normal views and habits of life, yet whose normality in an artificial compensation for a latent psychosis. They themselves suspect nothing of their condition. Their suspicions may perhaps find only an indirect expression in the fact that they are particularly interested in psychology and psychiatry and are attracted to these things as a moth to the light. But since the analytical technique activates the unconscious and brings it to the fore, in these cases, the healthy compensation is destroyed. The unconscious breaks forth in the form of uncontrollable fantasies and overwrought states, which may, in certain circumstances, lead to mental disorder and possibly even to suicide. Unfortunately, these latent psychoses are not so very uncommon.
Okay, well, that's due warning and reminder that we have to remember it this summer as we do our confluence, because if we open people up, open people's unconscious up during the confluence, we have to make sure we close it at the end of it, which we will do and we are planning to do. But I'm very glad that two of our six organizers are psychotherapy people. One's a psychiatrist and one's a psychologist with lots of experience. So,
and rather than opening and then closing, it may be like the whole artesian well finding a volcano. They're often little minor gas pockets that are clues on the way that, hey, maybe be careful about how you're digging here, because stuff's blasting out here and there. And so maybe it could be like, also, rather than closing, it can be an emptying, to clear their inner air in places. But like you said, you have to be careful, because if you hit the intense pieces, all of a sudden, it doesn't matter if they're in public or not, they were hit. And it comes rushing out.
Yeah,
hey, Annabelle.
Hey, Annabelle. And so then you might have a explosion or a blowout.
I'm glad we're talking about volcanoes in this first paragraph, because I watched a lot of volcano videos today because
Mhm.
I'm going to Iceland.
Oh, you're going to
Oh,
Iceland.
nice.
And so there was a volcano erupting last spring, which is still has lava flowing out.
Yeah.
And then there was another one roughly 10 years ago. And, people are giving me all these tips. Oh, you're going to Iceland. Oh, you should, read this, watch this in advance. And one of the big things about Iceland and why it has so many volcanoes all the time is under the surface, it's tectonic plates and the
Yes.
angle that they're on. And even this afternoon, before seeing what's going on with this paragraph, I was thinking how in personal lives, some of us are kind of, square in our background, like it follows some kind of narrative, makes a little bit of sense. But for some of us, that what's under the surface really is helter skelter, all a kilter, tilted, in this
Yeah.
way that Iceland is unusual. And one of the videos I watched today, there was this big crew of people who flew from Geneva, from a volcanology institute, to be there as fast as possible. They made up their minds within an instant. And just hearing what Jordan was just saying, um, that's what I'm thinking of for your confluence. There could be a shift that could happen in a moment.
Well, I've been following volcanic activity relative to not just global warming, but building code and seismic zones for 40
Right.
years.
Right.
And there are no seismic zones that are zero. The whole earth is moving. But it's interesting, when my sister went to Iceland with her family and they went scuba diving, there's a place you can touch the two tectonic plates and you can touch two continents, in the span of,
Yes.
and all I thought is, I hope they don't move when you're right there. It's like, but it's such a magical place because, like you said, under the surface, there's
Yes.
such a metaphor of what is or is not going on in each of us.
Yeah, because the magma is there anyway, right?
Right.
And I think that's true for all of us. We have our magma under the surface, however much we've worked, studied, meditated,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
done releases, whatever we've done.
And
Right.
I call it the living earth because it
Mm.
has every element in it, including, water is evaporated typically, but honestly, then water touches it, it explodes. So it's interesting. With the volcano opening up here, that's a really great example with Jung digging for digging an artesian well. That's really clean and cold and pure and not in any way not going to be beneficent, not going to be helpful. But then poof, you find a volcano while you're doing something innocent, so to speak.
There's a couple of comments I'd like to make. I really appreciate kind of I guess more or less the warning that Jung issues here. And it's interesting. I've noticed that I've noticed a tendency within myself and also within others when, you start reading Jung and you figure out kind of the way in which Jung talks about the unconscious and works with dreams and stuff, to kind of be somewhat mystified and kind of take on this slightly magical thinking about the practice of working with one's dreams, or with reading about the unconscious, or spending your time thinking about the unconscious. And that's all good and well, but I think it's also something that can really be kind of problematic. I know it has been for me in the past, and the thing that I've come to realize is that it can be deeply serious and also highly practical to do that kind of work. And it's not necessarily like some kind of modern brand of mysticism, although it can be. And it's really interesting to know that in some places Jung talks about the unconscious as if there's everything that one needs to be whole and heal oneself in the unconscious, but on the other hand, that one should be highly careful.
I really appreciate you brought that clear thinking piece up, because, for example, when I was on Maui, I remember my girlfriend at the time said, you let's go get you some cheap tennis shoes, because we're going to go walk on the lava fields. And of course, we're not going to go past the ropes, but it'll probably start to destroy and melt the bottoms of your shoes. But it was interesting. I had this strangest, kind of most beautiful and cautionary, and at the same time, what you said, clear thinking of, hey, this is practical feeling, with all that warmth under my feet, meaning, there's probably 30, 40 feet of, cooled lava, magma, underground lava, above ground. But that I was standing on this thing that was still way beyond lukewarm.
Yeah.
And so it's there. And it was very much a wonderful message of, oh, it's always there. Just don't hide it, but also be mindful where you dive in, because, you want to dive in the artesian well. You don't want to dive into the magma pool.
Yeah.
But that practicality that you bring up, I think, is so incredibly important, in that the loss of fear is one of the first steps toward wisdom, where understanding that you're gonna encounter your own intensities, but understanding
not only that, but I think also there's a tendency, I've done this, and this is related to the dream that I shared last week, but also this is just something I noticed as somewhat kind of a natural phase on the arc of kind of finding your footing and working with dreams and stuff, which is that it's easy to, given the rapidity at which we have dreams, to kind of trivialize working with one's dreams, where it's like there's this constant stream of commentary about your ego life that's going on, and working with that can be overwhelming. And there's a way in which, if you have 7 dreams a week or more, that on the whole they kind of lose their meaning, whereas you can have one dream and sit with it for a year sometimes, and constantly be mining different aspects of meaning, or kind of a new little jewel to sit and marvel over for a while. I think there's a way in which, that's kind of related to the issue of taking some kind of a slightly mystical approach to the unconscious, where it's like you're constantly just diving in.
Yeah, I'm trying to bring Joel Fernando into this conversation, since he's actually a practicing psychologist, but so far I'm having limited success. So
he's the one who made some wonderful comments last week, right?
Yeah.
From Brazil, is he? Or
yeah, he's from Brazil.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe he will be with us shortly. I'm hopeful.
Nick, I hear what you're saying about having a lot of dreams and how they can end up a little bit feeling like a whole lot of stuff that's in a bucket, that you've processed one, put it in the bucket, process another one, put it in the bucket. But I had an experience just this morning where I had been reading about the devil card, which is what I'm working on the Bota deck right now. And I had done some reading about it last night again. And this morning, as I was writing down my dream of last night, I opened that notebook, and the first dream in this particular notebook, which was back in January, and I was in a completely different Bota card, there was what I called a stag king, and there was a man, and he had these antlers. And at that time, I interpreted it one way. And I also then the next day, I might have spoken about it with you all. The next day, I went to see Sophie Teuber-Arp's work at the Museum of Modern Art, and there she had made a whole play with marionettes of a stag king who was the central character, and she had it made out of wood with these little metal antlers on it. But when I reread that dream and looked again at the drawing I had done, it reminded me of some of the reading I had done last night about the devil card, the characters with the antlers, all of that. And so I think we do have, the same way you spoke about one particular dream last week, I think we do have some dreams that stay with us.
Yeah.
And return we get more out of them as time goes by.
Yeah, and I think the flip side of that coin, to just bring back in the statement about having so many dreams a week, just 7 as an example, it would be easy for also just using myself as the example, it would be easy for me to forget a lot of dreams that I've had and just say, oh, right, I figured out what that one was about. And now I'm put to rest. But rather, it feels like those things just stay with us for a very long time. At least I know that they've stayed with me and will continue to do so for a very long time. And it seems like keeping a foot in each one of those is, at least for me personally, much more helpful than constantly trying to keep up with the seemingly endless stream of dreams that I write down in my notebook and stuff. It's also not to say that they don't make an impact, because they certainly do. But anyways.
So Joel has joined us, and he's a psychologist.
Hi guys. Hi Skip.
Good evening.
Good evening, everybody.
Yeah, I wanted to go back and talk to you about something, Joel, and pick your brain a little. We were looking at paragraph 192 of volume 7. Do you happen to have a copy of it handy?
Yes, I have a copy.
Okay, so it's
what's the paragraph?
192. And it's talking about how the unconscious is not harmless necessarily, and it shouldn't be used as a parlor game, etc. And for my own mind, I have opened this up quite a lot in the last 30 years. And I just wanted to get your cut on this. Lately, I've recognized that art, psychology, and religion are all doing the same thing, trying to do the same thing, which is to give access to the unconscious, to intentionally give access to it. And in fact, Lawrence Jaffe, in his book, Liberating the Heart, which is called Spirituality and Jungian Psychology by Lawrence Jaffe. So he is the son of Agnella Jaffe.
I have this book in Portuguese.
You have it too?
Yes. I'm a maniac.
And so you said, did you say unfortunately though?
Portuguese. In Portuguese.
Oh, in Portuguese. Oh, terrific.
On Portuguese, yes.
Okay, that's wonderful. So on page 41 of the English version, in a section called How Psychic Change Really Occurs, page 41 of the English, there's a sentence which I found very significant, and here's what Jaffe says. The purpose of Jung's whole psychology is to make accessible to us that healing power which resides in the unconscious, to make it accessible. And it seems to me that I've had a fair number of experiences with this now, that we certainly are speaking of the healing power, and the healing power applies in not only religion, but also in art and in psychology. And it's my conclusion that they're all talking about the same thing. And Dr. Jung actually said that in, well, he didn't say it about art, but he said it about religion and psychology in volume 10, which I can show you the quote I'm talking about. So I'd just like you to opine on how dangerous you think it is to to open these things, or whether it is in fact helpful. Obviously, religions. Here's Jung's quote, 367 from volume 10, and he says, "For thousands of years, the mind of man was worried about the sick soul, perhaps even earlier than it did the sick body. The propitiation of gods, the perils of the soul and its salvation, these are not yesterday's problems. Religion," and I added the emphasis here, religions are naturally evolved psychotherapeutic systems in the truest sense of the word and on the grandest scale. They express the whole range of the psychic problem in mighty images. They are the avowal and recognition of the soul, and at the same time, the revelation of the soul's nature. So I'm just wondering if you have a comment about this intersection of these three general disciplines. Did we lose you, Joel? Okay, maybe we did.
Just as a supplement to what you're saying, it's interesting to note that in every case, there's something that kind of mitigates the power of the unconscious to the ego. Whether
Yes.
it's religion or art, or I think even one could say a similar thing about dreams. It's not just raw conscious material communicated to the ego. There's some system in which that power is contained, whether it be the saints or the angels or what have you, religion or whatever somebody's muse is for art or a dream or something like that.
So it hit home when you mentioned Annabelle mentioned that they all get put in a bucket. Mind that they don't just kind of average out and become the datum mainstream doldrum. They lose their intensity and power. I remember when I was recording dreams every morning for an hour or so for several years, and then all of a sudden I stopped dreaming. Well, I didn't stop dreaming, I'm sure, because I didn't die. I mean, but it's the kind of thing where I felt like I was doing too much lucid dreaming, and
So,
but I look here and realized, oh no, I just started painting more dark paintings. So that was being poured there rather than into my conscious awareness. Segue back to your question to Joel.
So Joel, did you feel you could opine on that point or not?
Well, I don't. I believe I agree with Lawrence Jaffe. Is that the right pronoun?
Yeah, Jaffe.
Jaffe. Well, it comes to my mind Edinger, Edward Edinger. His work with about the new God imagery, and also about I don't know if I remember the title of his book, about the encounter between the ego and the self.
Ego and archetype.
Is who Edinger worked with the paintings of the sorry, I don't remember this painter now, but
William Blake.
William Blake. Yes, that's it. And he also worked with a theologian, Paul. Sorry, guys, but I think that this is true. This is theologians and theology and psychology, in this sense, are working
in the same area.
Yes, are working in the same area. Well, distinct distinctive fields, but they are in the same area or an intersection.
Intersection.
For me, we can't forget the relationship between Jung and Victor White.
Yeah.
There is a beautiful book. I don't have here with me now, but there are 5 chapters in this book working the relationship between Jung and Victor White, Father
Yeah.
Victor White.
Yeah,
He
yeah.
wrote a beautiful book, God's Forgotten Language.
Yes. Have you ever done anything with art in terms of this intersection?
Well, in the 90s, I
Mhm.
don't know if we can call art in this sense, but in 91, November 91,
Mhm.
for 94, 95, I worked with street children in
Uh-huh.
Brazil. And they were coming to, because I don't know if you know about the history of Brazil, but the dictatorship, we have a dictatorship here till 1985. And those kids, those children were in an orphanage.
Mhm.
Please help me in my English, because I read a lot in English, but I don't know if my pronounce of my English is okay. So
You're
I need
doing
your help.
very well. You're doing
Mhm.
very well.
Very well. Yeah.
Thank
We're
you. Thank you
we're
very much.
understanding
Yeah.
very clearly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And what did I do? I asked myself, what could I do for them?
Mhm.
And I was studying the O.C. number 5, the symbols of transformation. Maybe this is one of the Jung book that I love the most. I know there are deeper books, but symbols of transformation, when Jung wrote this book, he was being fundamentally more Jung, Jung being Jung. And I took a lot of fairy tales
Mhm.
with using the hero motive, and also about abandonment.
Mhm.
And we meet. I took care of 5 houses, but in a house of the boys, the kids, I worked about 3 years and 9 months.
Mhm.
And what did I do? I took my books. I went in supervision. I submit myself to supervision.
Mhm.
And every Wednesday, we met from 9 o'clock till 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 noon, midday.
Mhm.
And I uh, um, I asked them to, after telling the fairy tale, I asked them to draw, to put in in a draw, whatever they want, whatever they want. And for my surprise, I began to saw archetypal things, and then I asked to myself, oh my gosh, archetypes are real.
Yeah.
The archetypal image, of course, and one of those boys called me the attention. He did this drawing about the cup I mentioned yesterday or last Monday,
Mhm.
and in this period of 3 years and 9 months, they produced it. This is I said to myself, wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
Each of them produced exactly 66 to 69 drawings.
Wow.
And there is something going on here. And I took to I went to supervision,
Hmm.
and there was here a woman called Bonaventure, and she was the chief of the team that was translating. She came to Brazil running for the war, the Second World War,
Hmm.
and she was in charge of translating Jung books from German to Portuguese.
Hmm.
And I talked to her, and she visited me in my city. And I talked to Walter Boechat, that he studied in C.G. Jung Institute. And he made his personal analysis with Marie-Louise from France, and they helped me out. They are wonderful people with generous, very generous to me. And after I talked to them, what do you want to do with this, with all these productions? And one of the kids, I called him M, emerged the theme of the Dante's Nekoya,
Hmm.
the descent, and the descent, Descensus ad Inferos,
Hmm.
and the first drawing was about a hero fighting against 4 women. Those women were 4 witches, and the black and white movies when the villain also in black took the white lady, the feminine, and
Yeah.
we had in the corner a woman or a young woman with her hair like this. Oh my, help, crying for help. That was later on I perceived these as his animal, and uh, then he wrote. I realized that it was a Nekuya going on for the following drawings, and when he said and the names he put in the titles
Yeah.
were very significant.
Uh-huh.
For example, the frightening picture of the father of my father who died.
Mhm.
A small television set, and I count 4 or 5 generations, and in this television set, he could saw the father of his father, who was dead, who had died,
Yeah.
and I understood that he was trying to talk to me. I think, wow, it took 5 generations. So this he was. They were living in the streets. I think that it it took a lineage.
Mhm.
I don't know if I'm using the right word, but there are 5 generations till him, and
Mhm.
the drawing. Then I saw he the ascension. I understood that this please I am asking for your help. The ascension, the descent things are so much important and valuable as the ascension things, and vice versa.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's beautiful to. I just followed this. This was happening in front of my eyes,
Yeah.
and I felt privileged following them, and I stick to the image. This is very, this is very real. Stick to the image, and he uh, uh, there was a moment when he built. He had to uh, step. He made a golden stairway.
Yeah.
The theme of the stairway emerged, a golden one,
Huh.
and he had to step by step. He was climbing. No, he was walking in this stairway, and he stopped and he told me so. Joe, um, what if I took some of the gold of this stairway? And then he answered me. He said, I think that if uh, everybody who came after me took a little bit of this golden stairway, soon there will be no stairway. And when he said that, oh, thank God. I'm very glad to listen to this because he could not keep this gold, because this gold belongs to humankind,
Uh-huh.
belongs to humanity. And he keep climb, he keep going, and when he reached heaven, he was received by an angel, and the angel called him by his name, and the angel said, "Hi, what are you doing here?" Well, I'm here because I would like to talk to Jesus. I would like to ask a question for Jesus. And I think, oh my gosh, the quest.
Yeah. Well, the
He had
stairway
even
sounds
answered.
the stairway sounds a lot like it sounds like
Ladder.
Jacob's Ladder. Yeah.
Yeah, yes.
William
And
Blake, that one too.
yes, Yes. And then
He was
he
very
said,
lucid of the kid.
what?
I was very lucid of that boy to, ask the question, if I took some of this gold, because he sees its value and it's gold, but then he stops and realizes if he takes it, others would take it. Soon it will be gone, that it's for everybody. That's a really lucid, decision to
Yeah.
need.
Yeah. Jordan, you
Consciously, it's at the
somehow
same,
froze.
very
Your
connected.
your
He,
your image
I
froze.
will conclude.
Yeah, go ahead,
And
Joel.
he had to ask Jesus, and
Yeah.
then the angel said, "Well, if you came here to talk to Jesus, Jesus will talk to you." Okay, and then Jesus came to him and asked him, "Do you want to talk with me?" "Yes, Jesus, I have a question for you." Uh, what's the question? I would like to know, when I die, am I going to heaven or am I going to hell? And Jesus asked it to them, "That's your question?" "Yes." "Well, I will give you the answer you need, but you will receive this answer on earth. And
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. Say it again. You will receive this answer. What?
on earth,
On Earth. Yeah.
planet
Mhm.
Earth.
Yeah.
And the angel will took you to earth. The angel will put you in the earth, and after 50 minutes you will receive the answer. And 50 minutes, it was the time I took weekly to talk with them. And when he was on earth, the angel put him on earth.
Hmm.
And I like that very much as a psychologist, because uh, the I realized that a mandala was made complete. Earth, hell, earth, heaven, earth. And for a while, that is a mandala in the sense of Jung, maybe. And
Hmm.
he was on earth, and he started to sweat a lot. The first thing that came to me was the theme of the bath, the alchemical bath.
Hmm.
He was sweating so much that his bones were almost apparent. And
Hmm.
when sorry, 50, then he asked, the angel will come or not? And when it complete, sorry, 16 minutes, but the angel came from heaven in 59 minutes.
Hmm.
And in 60 minutes, the angel put his feet on earth. And
Hmm.
then he asked, angel, what's the answer to my question? When I die, am I going to heaven or am I going to hell? And the angel answers his question. And the angel says, and when you die, you will go to heaven. And then he got very happy. He started to jump and laugh. And the angel returned to heaven.
Hmm.
And he turned to me And he talked to me, Joel, how do you understand the answer of the angel? And then I reflected a little bit, and then I said to him, M, I think that, pay attention, pay attention. You are now 13, your 14th birthday is coming. The angel said, when you die, but you are not dead, you are living. I give exactly this answer to him. There are 2 days. The day that you are born, of your birth, and the day of your death. Between the day that you were born and the day that you will die, all the days belong to you.
Mhm.
This is up to you. Understood? You are not going to die tomorrow.
Yeah.
And then I talked to our team,
Mhm.
and I told them, well, the the door of heaven opened a little bit. He put this title, the door of heaven is open to you, or for you, please correct. And I talked to the crew, and I said uh, to our team, we must work because the doors of earth must open for him.
Mhm.
And what are those doors on earth? The high school. He need to profession to learn. His life must go on in
Yeah.
a positive way. We have to socialize, uh, to carry on his process of socialization. But I think what, if you give me more 5 minutes, the last picture that he made, that amazed me, because he made the draw of a Japanese ballerina,
Mhm.
and in her toes, plie position, I guess. But the skirt of the ballerina, we had the sun and the planets in
Mm.
order,
Wow.
and he called the dance of the planets. In
Mm.
each corner of the drawing, he made another. He wrote 1 to 10 in English. He was learning English. He wrote 1 to 10 on Portuguese. He made children in a circular, uh, with hands, giving hands to each other, surrounding a cherry tree. I think this is wonderful. And he's put his name also, and he called this the dance of the planets. That was his last picture, and
Wow.
he became he worked with. I ask to forgive my mechanical he started to work with cars, fixing cars and
Mechanic.
so on.
Mhm.
And this was my experience then. Today, I work at the court, and my job in the court is to listen to children, child and teenagers,
Mhm.
victims of sex abuse crimes.
Mm.
In audience, the judges call me to listen them to, and the idea we inspired on Chicago Advocacy Center experience. We put a small ludotherapy room near the judge. The judge follow our interview by internet on real time, and he sent me the answers of the prosecutor and of the defense, and I try to adapt it to them. But this experience that I have with those kids, street children,
Yeah.
collective Brazilian collective shadow,
Mhm.
were amazing.
Yeah.
Thanks for the rich opportunity. The boy
Yeah.
that draw the cup that you told us about the vase,
Mhm.
the vase, and the people. I start to think about me as the vase, or this kid was a vase. But it was a very ritual insight for me. Skip. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks for your story, Joel. That was fascinating.
Thank you very much.
And Nick or Annabelle, do you have any comments or questions for Joel before we go on?
Well, I just, as you talked about the combination of the folk tales, archetypal tales, hero journey that you brought to your work with the children. I'm not sure if you heard, but at the beginning of the evening, I was talking about how I'm preparing for a trip to Iceland. And only today I started watching volcanoes. One of them is live, so it's just a live video cam. But some of them are other ones. But the first thing that I did when I found out I was going was to start to read the sagas. There were some stories I was familiar with, and I haven't gotten very far because there are so many, and they are a kind of weaving together of Irish who came up to Iceland, Norse or Norwegian, Danish, and Swedish, and then of course the Wagner ring cycle, all of that German, right? So what I'm encountering, when you first said that there was the boy with his 5 generations of father, right? That sentence you spoke was the beginning of my just, how it's like the light, the electric plug goes in the socket. It was, the father of the father of the father of the father is exactly what I was reading last night in one of these very ancient, I mean, not so ancient, but from the year 1000. The Poetic Edda is one of the things I'm reading. And parts of it, it's the father of the father of the father of the father. And then you're in the present time. And you also have heaven, and you also have hell. So everything you said about kids on the street in Brazil is just what I'm reading about text from the year 1000 in Iceland. So
well, there is a synchronicity.
This is our universe. Yes, yeah. This is our universe.
Street children in Brazil in the 90s.
Yes.
The beginning of, that's amazing. Psyche, go searches psyche.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's very interesting.
Thank you.
Have you are you familiar with Nisa de Silveira? Silveira? Nisa de Silveira, Dr.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
I knew her.
You
I
knew
knew
her.
her because while I was a student of psychology, because I was studying calculation. I was in the first year
Mhm.
of engineering, and I was studying maths. And then when I finished this work, I asked it to myself, boy, I don't want to work calculating, working. I would like to work with people,
Mhm.
and then I start to walk in the library, and suddenly I just took a book from the library, and when I look at the book, it was written Jung,
Mhm.
and the author Nisi da Silveira. And
Interesting.
I read that book in 40 minutes.
In how many
Stood up.
minutes?
40 minutes.
40 minutes.
And for, oh my, where am I in the library? And when my head, I look psychology. And then, wow, psychology.
Mm.
I know what I'm going to do in
Very
now.
interesting.
And I have a meet with her. She
Yeah.
was a very, very deep woman, and a
Mhm.
very, very brutal intuition.
Mhm.
She was a genius woman.
She was a genius, yes.
She
No
was a
doubt.
genius.
Yeah.
She if we took the DMDR, memories, dreams, reflections, the chapter of, I had a feeling that this chapter, the confrontation with the unconscious, were the fountain of inspiration, uh, and I that she wrote letters to Spinoza
Mhm.
in space and time. She had a small book with 90 pages called Letters to Spinoza, and a very deep book. And she talked about a geometrical method. But I think that this was kind of, I think that this was one kind of active imagination of hers. And she returned this book as the fruit of active imagination.
Interesting. Okay, so we have a commitment to Nick to read on in this book, and so thank you, Joel, for that very interesting introduction. And
I'm thankful.
Yeah, and so Jordan, do you want to read number 193?
I will. Everything's been attenuating pretty bad, and I signed off, and it even took a while to sign off. So I don't know if it's my connection or if anyone else is experiencing
So far so good. And Joel, just for your information, if you go to the chat in the Zoom session, I've put the link to our MailChimp's reminder thing on there so that you will get my notices every time, because I send a notice
Thank you
out
very much.
in a couple of hours at least before every session so that you have the link. And okay, so far, Jordan, it's fine, right?
Okay, yeah. I'll certainly help you.
So let's see if we can blow through this chapter and get to the conclusion. I'm really anxious for the conclusion.
The paragraph 193. The danger of stumbling on cases like these threatens everybody who concerns himself with the analysis of the unconscious, even if he be equipped with a large measure of experience and skill. Through clumsiness, mistaken ideas, arbitrary interpretations, and so forth, he may even wreck cases that need not necessarily have turned out badly. This is by no means peculiar to the analysis of the unconscious, but is the penalty of all medical intervention that miscarries. The assertion that analysis drives people mad is obviously just as stupid as the vulgar notion that the psychiatrist is bound to go mad because he deals with lunatics.
Okay, I'll read 194. Apart from the risks of treatment, the unconscious may also turn dangerous on its own account. One of the commonest forms of danger is the instigating of accidents. I've been there. A very large number of accidents of every description, more than people would ever guess, are of psychic causation, ranging from trivial mishaps like stumbling, banging oneself, burning one's fingers, etc., to car smashes and catastrophes in the mountains. All these may be psychically caused and may sometimes have been preparing for weeks or even months. I have examined many cases of this kind, and often I could point to dreams which showed signs of a tendency to self-injury weeks beforehand. All these accidents that happen from so-called carelessness should be examined for such determinants. We know, of course, that when for one reason or another we feel out of sorts, we are liable to commit not only the minor follies, but something really dangerous, which, given the right psychological moment, may well put an end to our lives. The popular saying, old so-and-so chose the right time to die, comes from a sure sense of the secret psychological cause in question. In the same way, bodily ills can be brought into being could be brought into being or protracted. A wrong functioning of the psyche can do much to injure the body, just as conversely a body illness can affect the psyche. For psyche and body are not separate entities, but one and the same life. Thus, there is seldom a bodily ailment that does not show psychic complications, even if it is not physically caused. And I think everybody knows that I attribute my broken leg in 1990 to an accident of this kind. Annabelle, you want to go with 195?
Will I continue? Okay.
Yeah.
It would be wrong, however, to dwell only on the unfavorable side of the unconscious. In all ordinary cases, the unconscious is unfavorable or dangerous only because we are not at one with it and therefore in opposition to it. A negative attitude to the unconscious or its uplifting off is detrimental insofar as the dynamics of the unconscious are identical with instinctual energy. Disalliance with the unconscious is synonymous with loss of instinct and rootlessness. And that came from the instinct and the unconscious essay, I suppose. Should I go on? Because
Yeah, why not? Yeah, go ahead.
If we can successfully develop that function, which I have called transcendent, the disharmony ceases, and we can then enjoy the favorable side of the unconscious. The unconscious then gives us all the encouragement and help that a beautiful nature that a bountiful nature can shower upon man. It holds possibilities which are locked away from the conscious mind, for it has at its disposal all subliminal psychic contents, all those things which have been forgotten or overlooked, as well as the wisdom and experience of uncounted centuries which are laid down in its archetypal organs.
Okay.
Yep, I think this answered your question that you put out earlier in regards to, is this dangerous, in that it's primarily dangerous when it's disconnected. So
Yeah.
even the awareness of it, for example, if you think about tripping, if you think about stumbling, if you think about bumping into a doorway, you slow down or you speed up. You can adjust the scale and the speed of the rhythm, and then you don't. But it's as if, like you said, these determinants, these that are months or weeks or days before, or even seconds. I think he kind of answers basically don't be afraid of it, synchronize with it.
Yeah. And
That's not
I concur.
necessarily so direct though, Jordan, because bringing up the example of tripping, and I'm sure I've told this group that my ophthalmologist said to me blithely, "Good thing you didn't fall down a flight of stairs," when I explained to him that I wasn't seeing 3D and I was the only one who could determine that. But the trouble is, when you're not seeing 3D, you don't know you're not seeing 3D unless you know what I mean? Like, you don't know what it is until, yeah. So, and I think that that's a problem, or not a problem, that's a challenge in psychological, what can we call them? It isn't really defects. It's just misses, it's just not quite getting it. If you don't know, if you're not in tune with your instincts, your emotions, you have some feelings that are suppressed because of trauma or whatever, you don't have it. You don't have access.
But I think it's also intentional.
Can I make a couple of comments here?
Yeah, go ahead, Nick.
Yeah.
Well, I think there's a point of distinction between what Jung says in the first place about the unconscious not necessarily always being a benevolent source of wisdom that one can turn to.
Right.
And then the point that he's making here between more or less harmonizing one's kind of ego life and one's conscious mind with the unconscious. I think in the first place, he's talking about something that may be some potentially some kind of repressed issue that might come up when one starts to pay attention to their dreams or enters into analysis or something like that. I think maybe an analysis would be the hopeful situation because there would be a container for whatever the repressed issue is. But if someone is just at home working with their dreams and that comes up, then you've just opened this wound that you didn't even know that you had, and now you have to deal with it somehow. And that sounds like a really sticky situation, no matter how prudent you are about reading Jung or what have you. And here it seems like then Jung is making a point about these kind of accidents, these fateful accidents that kind of come as an extension of some part of myself thwarting myself, which is really interesting. Like to take Skip's example of you broke your leg, or you broke your leg
in the same way that Jung did.
Yeah, but it's funny, you can say that in a couple of ways, like, I broke my leg, or I broke my leg.
Or myself broke my leg.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So it's not ever that somebody else broke my leg or anything. It's that I
Jung's self broke his leg too in the same way exactly. And what happened after that, Nick? what happened after Jung broke his leg?
Oh, I don't
You
know.
Well, then he wrote the four most important books of his career after he broke his leg, after it's told him to slow down.
Yeah, it's funny. One thing that Jung said, I don't know if this is in an interview or a book, that I always enjoy is that I think it was at some point when he was asked about what he thinks about God, he said that he calls God anything that willfully crosses his path or something,
Yes.
something to that effect, which I really appreciate. There's
That's
this
pretty cool.
there's this faithful aspect to that I really enjoy. But that's all to say that it seems like here the point that Jung is making is that one can kind of I think there's a line. Yeah, if one can develop that function which I have called transcendent, the disharmony ceases. So there's this triad which takes place in this, and the third point is this transcendent function between thesis and antithesis, which is really important because if it were just manifesting as these accidents, there would be no transcendent function. There would be no synthesis taking place. It would just be this thing thwarting us continually.
Sorry, say that more clearly. I couldn't hear you. What's going to do away with the transcendent function?
I didn't say anything was going to do away with it, but it seems like this not working in our favor, us working kind of in disharmony with whatever's going on in the unconscious, it would stand to reason that the transcendent function would not be working properly or would not yet be in effect. So we
disharmony ceases when you develop it.
I regard it as totally in harmony.
Right, because when Jung broke his foot, to me, it wasn't not listening. And writing the four books wasn't not listening. It was actually resetting his footing. So he went through a trial of probably absolute pain. I mean, that kind of break fully, like even your foot coming off kind of break. I mean, there's a little bit of pain going on. And so in that sense, then he writes his four most prominent books. And right after that, I think what happened is he listened in that he allowed the harmony, but the harmony was initially a broken leg, which wouldn't sound initially positive. But in the end, after healing, he reset his footing. Maybe the fast foot was the one that broke, the one that pulling him. So it slowed down to synchro mesh with the slower foot, almost like a vision of the eyes.
Right. That's very similar to the eyes. Yes. Yeah, same.
Yeah.
I wonder though about the
and I'm glad you
crash.
brought up the point, Annabelle.
Yeah, go ahead, Annabelle.
I wonder though about the crash of 2008. Because Skip, you and I both experienced that in major ways.
Sure.
And
Including me too.
Reset both of our courses extremely.
Yes.
And I wonder whether that applies here as well.
Sure it does, because to me, though, it was, a long, slow teaching to me.
Yeah.
Okay. Which was, okay, I lost all my savings in the crash. And then in self-defense, I had to fight off a foreclosure for a decade in court. And in many ways, my defense was very much like the type of defense that our former president puts on, Trump, truthfully. But what I found out was that, number one, no court was ever going to rule in my favor, despite the fact that I was correct, that what I said was correct. I learned that. It was a very painful and long lesson of about a decade. And it pushed me again, like the broken leg, it pushed me again to focus more on Jung. Okay. And it pushed me to focus on my business career instead of my military career. Okay. Because after that break, I started in a business that 15 years later, we took public. Okay.
Mhm.
And after that break is because I was flying to India and Saudi Arabia so many times, 44 times to India and 23 to Saudi Arabia. I had a lot of time on airplanes to read. And so that forced me to go into the Jung and get more serious about it, which I wouldn't have done. Very likely I would not have done if I hadn't had my divorce, if I hadn't broke my leg and had it slow me down, and so on. And so there was something in the psyche that was telling me, slow down, you have something else to do in your life.
Mhm.
And it's not this. Okay.
Yeah, but I think
I remember.
reaching for that new thing, however, is something that's rather unique, because that's not something that always manifests for everybody. I know that I could think of, just to make a generic example, that it's so easy to imagine, you know, I say every day I've got to get up and go to work at some job that I don't really love, but it's a job that provides me with financial security, and for all the rational reasons it makes sense for me to stay there. But every day I wake up late, and I just always think, you know, stupid me, I can't wake up to my alarm, what have you. And I just keep cursing myself for waking up late and being late every day, and never asking myself, well, what should I really learn from this? Or is this a meaningful happening,
Mhm.
meaningful, continually occurring happening, where you might say, well, am I doing something that's completely opposed to whatever, I don't know, if you will, my soul?
That's a wonderful point. I think
Well,
it
yeah.
segues with Annabelle's comment earlier too, with
Yeah.
basically blind spots. It's not, it goes beyond not just knowing what you don't know. When you feel off and you realize something's missing, but you can't see it. And it's that oftentimes most people aren't aware of that, they can't see something, that they know the situation feels different, but it looks the same. So they go, oh, well, maybe I'm just me, and they move on. But I look honestly at 2005, April to May of 2008, May 5th of 2008. That whole time I was doing my self-published tarot deck. It was a 3-year long process, but it was kind of sidebar because I had my own architecture firm. I mean, it was 3 hours a day in a meeting every day preparing. But think about this, May 5th, 2008, at noon, my phone starts ringing. And between noon and noon 12:42, 2.5 years of full-time work left by either divorce, we have to pull our money out of this and put it out of the market and bury it somewhere else, or we need to get out of the real estate and this and that. And the whole time I just opened the box from DHL and I'm holding one shrink wrapped tarot deck. And after 42 minutes, I look over at this thing and my hand is not mine anymore. I mean, it's not asleep, but it's just been hanging out, almost like going, hello.
Yeah.
And right when I started to say I lost everything, I didn't complete the sentence. I said, I lost don't lose this. Don't lose this.
Yeah.
And I laughed at 3 hours a day, 5 days a week for 3.5 years. I worked on that thing.
Yeah.
Passionately. And it wasn't
Meanwhile,
until that moment that I actually allowed it to come in.
yeah. And meanwhile, for Nick, it's quite obvious to the people gathered here that you were meant to do something important with psychology, okay, in your life. You're not destined to be a short order cook for the rest of your life. And so that may that may feed you for the time being. But
well, thank you. I mean, I know I'm not destined to be a short order cook, and that was a situation which I just, pardon the pun, I just cooked up. I have no problem with waking up and getting to work on time.
okay.
But at the same time, I'm also able to acknowledge that that's not really my calling in life either.
Yeah, that's
it's funny. I'm
calling.
actually remembering that I listened to an interview with Robert Johnson. It's like a 3.5 hour long interview, and I think it's all on YouTube. It's called Slender Threads, a conversation with a Jungian analyst. And it's really wonderful. Robert Johnson is just a joy to listen to if you like Robert Johnson. Very, very soft spoken and well-spoken person. But anyways, he's talking about his training in Zurich, and he was saying that while he was there, he had an issue with the very same thing, that he time and time again was not able to get up and go to class, or he would wake up late and kept going to class. And I think that he was in his analysis with von Franz, or if not von Franz, then somebody else of her same ilk. And someone suggested that, maybe you're shorting your meditation practice or something like that. You're not waking up in time to, get up, have your tea, do your morning ritual and what have you, and then come in. So he said he started waking up at like 4 a.m, going through his somewhat lengthy morning process. And then he was able to kind of go to his training and go to pour himself into his studies completely. I just think it's really interesting that, there was an issue for somebody even who probably has a great deal of self-awareness and
I think that really supports, and I love that you said, you just cook that up. That's nice pun with a short order. You cooked that up in short order. But the example of those people who will then continually blame themselves and, oh, it's just me. Why can't I be better? Why can't I do this more effectively? When there's that, as going back to Annabelle's piece with the blind spots, and that we sometimes just don't see some things, the common inability to notice, no, this isn't me. It's me. It's occurring. I'm experiencing it. But is there a bigger picture scale problem? Which gear in my transmission, small or large, is slipping or grinding or, in some way stifling waking up to go to, say, that dead end job? And the ability then to look at that and just say, oh, well, let me look and survey my situation better. Like you said, him being self-aware and
yes,
still
I
that
think
occurring.
Simply asking the question of, is there some meaning beyond me endlessly blaming myself for this situation, can really move it into a synthetic place rather than just the kind of antagonism of A and B. Anyways, could we get to the next couple of pages here? I think
go for it. You're next.
What are we on? 196?
197?
7,
Okay.
I think.
No. Because you just quoted from the 197.
The unconscious is continually active, combining its material in ways which serve the future. It produces no less than the conscious mind subliminal combinations that are perspective. Only they are markedly superior to the conscious combinations, both in refinement and in scope. For these reasons, the unconscious could serve man as a unique guide, provided that he can resist the lure of being misguided. In practice, the treatment is adjusted according to the therapeutic results obtained. Results may appear at almost any stage of the treatment, quite irrespective of the severity or duration of the illness. And conversely, the treatment of a severe case may last a very long time without reaching or needing to reach the higher stages of development. There are a fair number who, even after therapeutic results have been obtained, go through further stages of transformation for the sake of their own development. So it is not true that one must be a serious case in order to go through the whole process. At all events, only those individuals can attain to a higher degree of consciousness who are destined to it and called to it from the beginning, i.e., who have a capacity and an urge for higher differentiation. In this matter, men differ extremely, as also do the animal species, among whom there are conservatives and progressives. Nature is aristocratic, but not in the sense of having reserved the possibility of differentiation exclusively for species high in the scale. So too with the possibility of psychic development. It is not reserved for specially gifted individuals. In other words, in order to undergo a far-reaching psychological development, neither outstanding intelligence nor any other talent is necessary, since in this developmental moral qualities can make up for intellectual shortcomings. It must not on any account be imagined that the treatment consists in grafting upon people's minds general formulas and complicated doctrines. There is no question of that. Each can take what he needs in his own way and in his own language. What I have presented here is an intellectual formulation. It is not the sort of thing discussed in the general run of practical work. The little snippets of case histories I have woven into my theme give a rough idea of what happens in practice.
Okay. Yeah, let's just
Let's
go on.
continue.
Yeah,
Because I think this next,
Go ahead, Jordan.
Sure.
Go ahead.
paragraph 199. If, after all that has been related in the foregoing chapters, the reader should still not feel capable of forming a clear picture of the theory and practice of modern medical psychology, that would not surprise me very much. I would, on the contrary, be inclined to blame my faulty gift of exposition, since I can hardly hope to give a concrete picture of that wide field of thought and experience which is the domain of medical psychology. On paper, the interpretation of a dream may look arbitrary, muddled, and spurious, but the same thing in reality can be a little drama of unsurpassed realism. To experience, in italics, to experience a dream and its interpretation is very different from having a tepid rehash set before you on paper. Everything about this psychology is, in the deepest sense, experience. The entire theory, even where it puts on the most abstract airs, is the direct outcome of something experienced. If I have accused the Freudian sexual theory of one-sidedness, that does not mean that it rests on rootless speculation. It too is a faithful picture of real facts which force themselves upon our practical observation. And if the interference is made from them proliferate into a one-sided theory, that only goes to show with what powers of persuasion, both objective and subjective, the facts in question themselves bring to bear. The individual investigator can hardly be asked to rise superior to his own deepest impressions and their abstract formulation. For the acquisition of such impressions, as well as their conceptual mastery, is in itself the labor of a lifetime. For my part, I had the great advantage over both Freud and Adler of not having grown up within the narrow confines of a psychology of the neuroses. Rather, I approached them from the side of psychiatry, prepared for modern psychology by Nietzsche. And apart from Freud's views, I also had before my eyes the growth of the views of Adler. In this way, I found myself in the thick of the conflict from the very beginning and was forced to regard not only the existing opinions, but my own as well, as relative, or rather as expressions of a certain psychological type. Just as the Brouwer case we have discussed was decisive for Freud, so a decisive experience underlines my own views. Towards the end of my medical training, I observed for a long period a case of somnambulism in a young girl. It became the theme of my doctor's dissertation, and it refers to on the psychology and pathology of so-called occult phenomenon. For one acquainted with my scientific writings, it may not be without interest to compare this 40-year-old study with my later ideas.
Yeah. Annabelle, do you want to do number 200?
Work in this field is pioneer work. I have often made mistakes and had many times to forget what I had learned. But I know and am content to know that as surely as light comes out of darkness, truth is born of error. I have let Guglielmo Ferrero's mot about the, quote, miserable vanité du savant, close quote, serve me for a warning, and have therefore neither feared my mistakes nor seriously regretted them. Oh yeah, you don't want me to read that whole thing in French, do you?
No.
Sure not. Yeah, okay. And have therefore neither feared my mistakes nor seriously regretted them. For me, scientific research work was never a milk cow or a means of prestige, but a struggle, often a bitter one, forced upon me by daily psychological experience of the sick. Hence, not everything I bring forth is written out of my head, but much of it comes from the heart also, a fact I would beg the gracious reader not to overlook if, following up the intellectual line of thought, he comes upon certain lacunae that have not been properly filled in. A harmonious flow of exposition can be expected only when one is writing about things which one already knows. But when urged on by the need to help and to heal, one acts as a pathfinder. One must speak also of realities as yet unknown.
Yeah. So Jung himself is saying that this is, early work that he was writing about here, and it's he himself recognized that it was unfinished, and obviously in later work he does amend his thoughts quite substantially, um, but it is an interesting period piece, I would say. And so I'll just read the conclusion here and then we can have a general discussion.
Real quickly before you do,
Yeah.
if you wouldn't, just that rather than reading the French, but just literally the misérable vanité du savant, the miserable vanity of the savant, meaning his exposition was so key here, even about things he doesn't know, where the savant will just say what's correct, but they don't know. But he's talking about things you know. So I just thought that was an important distinction to dial into on that paragraph.
Okay, great. I agree. Conclusion. In conclusion, I must ask the reader to forgive me for having ventured to say in these few pages so much that is new and perhaps hard to understand. I expose myself to his critical judgment because I feel it is the duty of one who goes his own way to inform society of what he finds on his voyage of discovery, be it cooling water for the thirsty or the sandy wastes of unfruitful error. The one helps, the other warns. Not the criticism of individual contemporaries will decide the truth or falsity of his discoveries, but future generations. There are things that are not yet true today. Perhaps we dare not find them true, but tomorrow they may be found, I guess. So every man whose fate it is to go his individual way must proceed with hopefulness and watchfulness, ever conscious of his loneliness and his dangers. The peculiarity of the way here described is largely due to the fact that in psychology, which springs from and acts upon real life, we can no longer appeal to the narrow intellectual scientific standpoint, but are driven to take account of the standpoint of feeling and consequently of everything that the psyche actually contains. In practical psychology, we are dealing not with any generalized human psyche, but with individual human beings and the multitudinous problems that oppress them. A psychology that satisfies the intellect alone can never be practical, for the totality of the psyche can never be grasped by intellect alone. Whether we will or not, philosophy keeps breaking through because the psyche seeks an expression that will embrace its total nature. Okay, Nick, you want to chat on that?
Well, yeah, I'm not, that last line, it kind of threw me. I'm not quite sure what he means.
Well, he's saying that, these things are coming along all the time. And one of the things I wanted to mention about this paragraph is that I think it's before he observed the process of individuation as a unique thing. He definitely knew that something was coming through that was affecting your life, whether it's a broken leg or being taken by the writing or the video of somebody, whatever it is. He knew that those things were coming through, but he hadn't yet delineated at this point in time, which is something like 1915, for the most part. He did not yet understand himself the significance of the individuation process. That's my opinion. Okay. And
I would agree.
Just let me finish, Jordan.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, so the point is, and we've actually come across this quite recently, that the individuation process is about you taking yourself out of the collective. Okay, individuation means you're taking yourself out of the collective. And so he's talking about it here because he's talking about, doing things that are not the same as your peers. And you have to be able to bring it forth and then report it. He says it's a duty to report it, right? And so, as an example, this YouTube channel is actually an example of this because I kept being pushed for a long time, not only by my family, but by my own psyche, to do something about my Jungian knowledge. And that began with a website and a lot of essays I wrote in the early 2010s. And then I started this channel in 2016, so going on 6 years ago now. And it definitely was my calling. I'm late for a lot of things, but I very rarely am late for a session. I mean, even tonight, I was hustling to get some things done for the family here. And I offended my mother-in-law by sort of shouting her down at the dinner table. And I had to apologize to her for that because she's saying, well, why is such and such happening in the Olympics? I'm saying they're telling me now on the TV what the answer to that is, but I can't hear it because you're talking to me. So, it just popped out. But then when I got online, Nick, I got here 30 seconds before you did. So I was the first one here, even though, you also were early. Okay, so the point is that I'm called to this. What I'm doing, what I've been doing for 6 years now is a calling for me. If I've earned any money at it, I mean, I haven't earned any money at it because it costs me more than that anybody pays me for it. And so I'm definitely called to do it. I don't know why, but that part's unconscious and I'm sure it will emerge. But what I do know is that I am following my bliss, in Joseph Campbell's words, and he's not necessarily my favorite guy anymore. He was in the 90s, but he's not any longer. And so anyway, go ahead.
Nick, to speak to the philosophy keeps breaking through. It seems to me he's making a clear statement. I mean, philosophers are people too. I mean, so they have a psyche also, but that philosophy keeps breaking through to me means it's not done. It's not once I learn Aristotle and Schopenhauer and Nietzsche and et cetera, out of an ad nauseum, or the primary 20, they're not done. That's not about just becoming having a scholarship with those is that the philosophy is evolving. It seems that he's implying there, so that culture and thought are evolving because of the psyche that's looking to embrace, to seek an expression, to embrace its total nature. So it seems to me that he's saying that the psyche and the unconscious are also one of the generators of thoughtful evolution via the philosophy keeps breaking through, where we're still moving forward. We're not there yet. There's more to come.
Yeah, surely that's right. And that's all logos, right?
Right.
And
Hey, before we go here, I just want to
Yeah.
say, like, this is, I know you all tend to be very disparaging of philosophy, but this is clearly not a disparaging remark and one that's in the affirmative for
No,
philosophy. And it's
completely.
also
And
interesting to just note that, anytime a philosopher or a theologian or a sage or what have you, they're talking about something that is integral or bedrock to the reality in which we live, it's fundamentally inexhaustible.
sure.
Volumes and volumes and volumes and volumes can be written about it. There have been literally hundreds of thousands of books written about Plato's dialogues, people trying to explicate what Plato said in a very short span of words for thousands and thousands of years. Parmenides' poem, or maybe to a lesser extent Aristotle, but still to some extent.
Mhm.
And it's really interesting to note that, whatever Jung is writing about, they're clearly all very much involved in the same game. They're all writing about something that's truly inexhaustible. And I think it's very much reflected in the quote where he says, "A psychology that satisfies the intellect alone can never be practical, for the totality of the psyche can never be grasped by intellect alone. Whether we will or no, philosophy keeps breaking through because the psyche seeks an expression that will embrace its total nature."
Righto.
of
Okay.
which philosophy is an integral part of. I mean, I may sound like I come off as disparaging on philosophy, but I mean, I started out as a multiple major in architecture, philosophy, and psychology, trying to triple major. And then, of course, the 30-page papers the second year knocked both the other two off from architecture. I love philosophy.
Yeah,
But
it's
I think what's
also
interesting here is that
Yeah, go ahead.
I think I love this last statement because he typically is disparaging of anything other than psychology and individuation. But here he includes philosophy is almost like his right hand. I mean, and I love that he did that, because right there it's saying philosophy is alive.
I mean, in volume 16, he literally calls himself a philosopher in a psychologist's coat. But
Right.
I don't know if
Yeah.
it actually is that disparaging of philosophy, and he continually writes about Nietzsche and Schopenhauer.
but he did say that philosophy is the logos. Okay. And he did say explicitly at the beginning of the Red Book, and he never changed it. He never looked back. He never changed anything, that he wasn't talking about the logos. Very simply.
Yeah, but I think we commit a major fallacy when we assume that all philosophy is logos. But this is an abstract conversation that we've had many times, and we could have many more.
No,
hours, so let's not.
we go up and down mountains on these things, Nick.
Yeah,
And so, I agree with you. And, philosophy is all well and good. It's just limited. And by that, I mean, anything that gets put down in writing, okay, becomes the logos, to include the 20 volumes of C.G. Jung's works, plus the Red Book.
Yeah, which is why it's so interesting in the paragraphs which came before this one, how he makes a distinction between what he's written and how it's all predicated upon real experience.
Yes, right.
And it's also interesting to just note one more time that, it's so interesting that he says, because the psyche seeks an expression that will embrace its total nature, which seems like an utter impossibility, because it seems that anytime that whether it be Plato or Jung or any of these people, when somebody is talking about something that's truly inexhaustible, they almost inevitably have to talk about it in paradox, and they can't talk about the thing which they're actually attempting to talk about, but that thing always affords new conceptualizations of itself, which are
Truly.
never actually the thing itself, which is just
Right.
really interesting. I don't know.
Right.
If we
Well, I think that is an interesting example, and I think it to me reminds me of how to use concrete. And the philosophy would be you're setting up all this particular form work in a certain context, in a certain shape. The concrete doesn't dry. It cures for 28 days, and then it's not at 95% cured until at the end of almost a year, but it cures into a hexagonal lattice. It's literally a crystal. That's why you'll see cracks and breaks at 30, 60-degree angles in most spalling and cracking. But you pour then, like you just said, you pour all this concrete. It's actually a chemical reaction that's occurring. It creates its own heat. So in that sense, logos wise, it's a little bit like the magma before. I mean, you can pour concrete in the winter, just tent it. It'll create its own heat, like someone sleeping in a sleeping bag. But this philosophy seemed to be the form work. And the way you said, I really liked, similar, I'm paraphrasing, and then it gives us a new way, a new lens basically to look at these contents in the context of the form of any particular philosophy. And in that sense, we get new concepts from it.
The limits of any philosophy are also the limits which Jung has to suffer too in his books, because anybody would be wrong to assume that because you've read all of Jung, you understand all of the psyche. I mean, the psyche by nature of being itself has to be so protean that it could never be put down into words.
Right. I just want to, we're near the end of our time here. So and it's, you know, it's not a hard end, but I wanted to ask Joel, with, you know, what you took out of this evening.
I think that this chapter is very rich chapter, and I think that touches in things like how orthodoxy and the orthopraxis in analytical psychology feed themselves, but touches also in important questions about epistemology on or in analytical psychology. I think that this quote, psyche searches its own expression. This is very, very beautiful. And I think that what George said is brilliant.
Thank you.
If analytical psychology is a tree, the humus, myth is the soil, and Jung has a quote, sounds more or less like this, that psychology should not split in the dish that she ate, and that dish is philosophy. I think that maybe our task in the studying the history of philosophy, for example, like Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, and Plato, and the pre-Socratic philosophers, is how maybe we have to accurate our psychological ears as a sense, as a we have the sense of the vision, the sense of audition. How the objective psyche speak or Sprache in the mouth of Schopenhauer and in the mouth of Nietzsche and in the mouth of the major authors of philosophy. And in this sense, psyche capturing the mouth of these major authors in philosophy is searching for itself, to express itself.
Yes.
Sorry for my
That's
English.
no,
But,
that's an essential point, that the psyche is looking to express itself. That it also goes to the collective unconscious. I got asked this question earlier today, whether there are multiple collective unconsciouses, and the point is that the collective is always trying to express itself, and the individual who is individuating and therefore not part of the collective is trying to express something that is not quite there in the collective, right? Not quite there. And and that's what individuation is about. So,
Well, I found that's a really, I think, beautiful comment, Joel, when you mentioned, epistemology in psychology, because epistemology being the philosophy of how we come to know things. And then in a sense, epistemology is literally just etymology at the scale of whole movements, rather than just etymology of this history of words. So I really like that. Look at the psychology to the mouth of each philosopher, and you penning the epistemology in psychology, because in a sense, it puts us in context of being with Jung and also beyond Jung, both in smaller and larger scales of where he came from.
Now, I would like to remember that Jung calls the logos in a symbolic way the spermaticos logos that came from the spermatical logos.
Spermatical logos, the inception.
Yes.
right.
Which is so interesting because that's a Stoic conception.
Right, it is.
Well, and
But I have to wholeheartely agree and really just appreciate your comment, Joel, that no matter
Thank you.
through whom psyche is speaking, it's always the psyche that's trying to express itself, whether it be Plato or Jung or anybody.
right. Absolutely. And so let's go back to this one sentence. The purpose of Jung's whole psychology is to make accessible to us that healing power which resides in our unconscious. I think that's one of the most powerful sentences I ever read in my life.
And that also puts it into context, including philosophers. I mean, that there's so much in that rich sentence.
Yeah, I mean, philosophy, Elizabeth I died with a book called The Consolation of Consciousness or something like that by Aristotle in her hand. And it was translated by a man named Boetius about 300 or 400 years earlier, who had discovered it, and he was literally being put to death. He was being executed, and the way they were doing it was to screw screws into his skull, which must have been excruciating, but he was nevertheless focusing his time and effort on making that translation, because without that translation, we would not have anything about Aristotle even. But the psyche was making him do that even in his darkest hour.
Well, and that's also one of the origins of, you got to turn the screws on that focus. And instead of on the focus, you have to focus while the screws are being turned. So that's regardless of the pain and intensity, there's that ability to be the eye in the storm and maintain course.
Yeah.
And even change course as you navigate.
Yeah.
He certainly didn't waste trouble.
Yeah. Right. Okay. Anything else, Annabelle?
I think we're pretty much covering it.
Okay, well, next week we're going to start with the essay 2 of the 2 essays, which is the relations between the ego and the unconscious. So this is Jung's shot at it long before Edinger had a shot at it. Okay, so he was writing this about the time Edinger was born, I think. Edinger was born in 1922. And I'm pretty sure this was written significantly before that. Yeah. Parts of it are from 1917, 1920. So that's right when Edinger was, and from Psychology of the Unconscious, 1916. Those are dates mentioned here for the second essay. And so, you know, Edinger wrote Eros and Archetype, or Ego and Archetype, yeah.
Nice Jungian slip.
Yeah. Ego and Archetype. He wrote Ego and Archetype, but
2 points to Nick.
from what we see here, Jung was taking a crack at it quite a few decades earlier. You know, in the same sense that William Blake took a crack at Answer to Job long before Jung did, 150 years before Jung.
Well, there's such a lineage there. I mean, William Blake to Nietzsche to then William James and then Jung. And I look at William James almost oftentimes as diet Carl Jung. I mean, it's, you know, it's no less true and meaningful, but Jung just, it's a bigger buffet.
Yeah. And one of the amazing things about William Blake is he was able to see it backward because
to print it, right?
He did it in etchings, and, you know, actually put the words of the book of Job in etchings around the etching, but he had to write them onto the etching plate backward.
Yeah, wood cutting and engraving and alchemical corrosive etching. Yeah, you've got to mirror it so it comes out legible.
Yeah, I've never been terribly drawn to that. It just makes me crazy to think about doing a woodcut that I have to do backward, especially when the words come up. So,
well, and with a woodcut, especially because there's 2 lines per line, so that there's a vessel in the wood to receive the ink. I mean, it's not just carving.
Yeah. Okay, we're getting a lot of call here, Jordan, for a Bitcoin chat. So I promised that we might do something with it on Sunday. A little bit.
Sounds like trouble.
Yeah.
The devil's work.
Annabelle, can I still play hooky on Sunday? Oh wait, did you hear that, Skip?
That's right. You can.
Nick told me I had to wake up late and wonder why that day.
Yeah, there you go.
All right. You can act that out.
Yeah. No, I'll be there. Well, we'll see. I mean, I'm no financial expert. I'll say that.
I am not either, but I'm trying to learn.
Yeah.
But it's a new world out there, and it's going to be for our children's children to worry about, not for us. I think, or at least not for me. I've got enough to worry about coming up.
Joel, where in Brazil are you?
I'm in a city called Vitória. It's an island.
Victory.
If we translate to English. It's an island surrounded by lacanians. It's the followers of Lacan here is our Egyptian plague.
Uh-huh.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Joking. I'm just joking.
It's okay. How far south?
We are surrounded by followers of Lacan here. But no, there are more people. It's because I just went to college because of Jung to study analytical psychology.
Yeah.
And there are a few people studying Jung here,
Uh-huh.
and but I think I know by myself with my life that analytical psychology could really make the difference in life. Analytical psychology is for life.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
absolutely.
It's applied psychology. And this chapter told us analytical psychology is absolutely empirical one.
Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we're talking about this summer. So maybe you can think of coming up to Montana this summer for our confluence.
Oh my, that's a dream. That's a dream. I would
Okay.
love to, but it's on my to try to understand what I'm trying to say. I became the main psychologist at the court, listening to children and teenagers sexually harmed in audience.
Mm.
So I travel all the state, and my agenda till November. I have the year is almost gone. So
Yeah, that's right.
I would like to say to you that I really appreciate the invitation.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much for accepting me here.
Yeah, you're welcome.
And
Thank you for joining us.
Yeah,
It's a pleasure to have you here.
you certainly enrich our discussion.
I don't know if I will use the right word about hugs. Hug is this?
Yeah.
Like embrace.
Yeah.
Embraces.
Yeah.
Embraces.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Embraces.
Annabelle. Embraces for you all.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Have a nice week.
Anyway, I put the website on the chat
thank you very
for
much.
you on Zoom if it's useful to you.
But
Okay.
if a miracle happen, I will travel to Montana with love. The good state of Montana. I heard there's a good fishing there.
Yes, there's good fishing there, and it will only take 4 days out of your time. You won't miss.
Thank you.
I promise it's all numinous. It's only
I will
numinous.
travel. I will be in Montana.
Obrigado
Many
to
embraces.
Montana.
Oh man. Thank you very much, Jordan.
Yeah, see you.
Yeah.
Bye, everybody.
Okay, peace. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Yeah.
Thank you.